ever used Illustrator before, Inkscape is like a free and open source version of Illustrator. It allows us to create vector lines and also has a plugin called InkStitch, which creates embroidery files for us. So just from a workflow point of view, Inkscape is not a good designer. It's great for, the extension is really good for putting stuff onto the embroidery machine, but in terms of designing, I'd really recommend that you use Illustrator. So start off, make your design on Illustrator, work out what you want, and then come to Inkscape on one of these computers and go from there, instead of trying to design on Inkscape.
And we just basically create something.
Yeah.
Quick question. So, because there are two different programs, does it mean that we need to save it in different versions, or?
Good question. So to go from Illustrator to Inkscape, you save it as an SVG,
Okay.
which you can just do from there.
Okay.
I think you can just do like save as SVG. Cool. So having said don't design on Inkscape, we're now going to design on Inkscape just for this embroidery intro. So if there's anything open, you can close that and we'll start completely from scratch. So we'll just close the and then go file new. Awesome. So if you've closed Inkscape, then I want you to open up Inkscape, which you can do by going to the top here and typing in Inkscape, which someone already has. Perfect. Cool. So you may have seen that we have two different hook sizes for the embroidery machine at the moment. We have this larger one and the small one, which is currently loaded up. To accommodate for those sizes, we make our document two different sizes. So we have the small size, which is 130 millimeters by 180, and the large size, which is 160 by 260. So to change that, we go up to the top left of Inkscape to find File. So you have to hover right over the top bar. Yeah. And then go down to Document Properties.
And basically, keep the fabric nice flat.
And then in the width and height boxes, you want to change them to either the small frame or the big frame dimensions.
Change our needle position. So, trying to change the needle well the fabric.
The width and height properties, yeah.
And I now have this exact. So, one of
160 by 260.
embroidery stitch is typically 7 stitch or a steel stitch. So in embroidery terminology, it's called steel, but we quite often refer to it as set on this thing here. And so what we're looking for.
Cool. And once you've done that, you can just close that document box.
Basically, it's zigzag, except that each thread falls directly after the last one. We're not having that big gap. So in terms of stitch size, this is what we changed to get it to
no, you just hit the little exit updates automatically. That's it. Cool. So now we can design whatever we want inside this little square, or move stuff over from Illustrator, and we won't have to worry about going outside of our hoop. Cool. So the easiest way to make shapes and paths on Inkscape is to use the Bezier tool, which is hotkey B. So if you click B, you can get onto that tool, and this is much like the pen tool. So we will need two lines as well as one circle or square shape. So if you wanted to make two different lines, you can make them like squiggly and interesting, and yeah.
With the steel stitch,
once you've finished doing one of the lines, you hit enter to like confirm it, and then you can do the other line.
What will happen is basically we'll just keep building up on top of it. Like Illustrator.
Yeah, a lot like Illustrator, except not as good.
I just hold control and then zoom.
What the machine does come with, there's a bunch of pre-programmed designs. They are
So you hit enter or return.
stitches.
Yeah. And then once you've got 2 lines using the Bezier tool, then you want to make a third shape, which will be a solid shape that we make. So you can get to them on the toolbar on the left-hand side.
Just those ones?
Yeah, those ones.
And you can switch to red. And basically, it's basically a little chart telling you what.
Yeah, so you can make a rectangle or like polygon or a star or a circle. We'll just be using this for an example, so don't worry too much about making it look super beautiful.
Doesn't matter what color they are?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Cool, so you can just click and drag to create a solid shape. Nice. Okay, so we all have 2 lines and at least one filled in shape of some sort. Great. So Hannah has been telling you about different embroidery stitches and stuff like that. For the digital embroidery machine today, we'll be going over a running stitch, a zigzag stitch, and a fill. So those are the 3 main things that we're going to be doing. We'll start off with the running stitch, which is just, it's at the top dashed line up there. It just is a normal stitch that you would imagine you'd get from a sewing machine if you were just running it along. Cool. So use the toolbar on the left side to select your just normal selecting tool and select one of those lines. Cool. So for a running stitch, there's a number of parameters that we need to set. So on the left-hand side, you should have a fill and stroke. If you don't, it is this symbol here. That's the one. Yeah, click that one. Yeah, click it. Then fill and stroke will open up. So for a running stitch, we want no fill, which is the first tab.
Which one was it, sorry?
Oh, so it's this box, which is already open, but if it isn't open, it is...
That one? No.
No, it's not there. You can get to it by going to the top and clicking window.
Oh, yeah.
Or clicking view. And then, oh yeah, that's the one there.
That's one? Oh, sweet, thank you.
On this one, it is... It's a symbol that looks like this. Yeah. You go to view, I think, or edit. Oh no, it's here. It's this little symbol. Yeah, so you can click that and this box will pop up. Yeah. So in the first tab, it's all about fill. For a running stitch, we want no fill. So once you've selected the little X, then you can go to the next tab, which is stroke paint. For that one, we want a stroke, so you click the solid square, which is next to the X one. Nice. And finally, stroke style. This is where you differentiate between a running stitch and a zigzag stitch. So for a running stitch, we make it 0.01 millimeters. So in the width, you type in 0.1 millimeters. 0.01. Yeah, in width. And change it to millimeters, not pixels, annoyingly. Yeah, you just already type it.
Basically, is your width as well? It's just like one stitch.
Yeah.
It's width and thread as well.
Yeah, very, very small. That's great. Cool. So now you'll notice that your line has, like, hopefully, disappeared. Yeah, there we go. It's not gone. It's just so thin that you can't see it from this far away. So it is still there. Don't worry about it too much. So now we're going to use the extension ink stitch to learn how to go from drawing vectors to the digital embroidery machine. So with that line selected, which means it has the box around it, you go all the way up to the top again, find extensions, go down to ink stitch, click on English, unless you can speak Dutch or French. Go down and click parameters, or params it's called. And then what should open up is a box which gives us a bunch of wonderful options and a preview.
But basically, it's going to have this stage. It's going
If you were after another computer, then there are two there that you can use, or you can jump on something else. Cool, so we've all got that box and that preview up. So on the left-hand side, it gives you a bunch of different options that you can change to change what your stitch turns out like. So the default, you can play around with each of these. The default running stitch length is the one that changes the most. So making that longer makes the stitch length longer, and shorter makes it shorter. If you do it too short, it will get caught in the machine and the thread will break or the needle will break. So do some tests and see what happens. Don't worry too much if you break the needle. Cool. So that's one stitch type. So we'll hit cancel on that one, or apply and quit rather. Would be better. Cool. So now those parameters are assigned to that stroke. So we've done that one, and we can move on to one of the others. So now select your other stitch, your other stroke rather. Yep. And we'll go through the same process, but to make it a zigzag. So we want no fill. We want a stroke paint to be solid. Yep, a flat color. And in stroke style, we want to make it as thick as you want your zigzag stitch to be. So you can make it like 2 millimeters, and it will give you a really nice solid zigzag stitch. I'll just get an example.
And they can be any design you like, but we can also use it as a way to reinforce weaker areas, repair things, and also join and layer.
So the bottom two on here are both zigzag stitches and different densities. So that's sort of what a zigzag stitch will end up looking like, but hopefully a bit cleaner. Yeah, so if you make it like 1 or 2 millimeters thick, then we can see what happens. Maybe if we choose some different ones, then we can look at each other's computers and see how they change. So you've got 2 millimeters, what one of you? You've got 3, so maybe you want to do like 1 millimeter. Not 0.1.
Oh, right, got it.
Yeah. Cool, and hit enter to apply that. And now you should see your line looks quite thick. Cool. And then with that line selected, we'll go up to extensions, ink stitch, parameters, and then you should be able to see a preview of what your line will look like, as well as a bunch of options.
What I'm going to do, basically.
Yeah, so the one to change here is zigzag spacing. If you make that smaller, it will make your spacing closer together, and wider will make it a less dense zigzag space. So you can change that and see it update on the parameters. Yeah, so that's a great example. If you want to quickly pop around and look at this screen, here it's been changed to 5 millimeters, so you can really see the distinct differences between 5 millimeters and something like the default, which is 0.4. Yeah. And if we look on this screen here, you can see with a thicker line weight, it will make that zigzag stitch wider.
We then have the really simplified for the job.
Cool. One of you made your... Yeah, so if you do 0.1, it will break the machine. It will just like continuously break the needle. So probably not the best thing to do. 0.4 is the default, and that seems to work just okay. Yeah, that's sort of the minimum that you want to do.
What does this one do?
So the running stitch length is for the running stitch, so it doesn't do anything for when we're doing a zigzag stitch, yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you changed it?
No, so it doesn't matter for this one. Cool. Once we've got like reasonable settings, then we can hit apply and
see what else they're doing. The other thing I can do is I can tidy it up, and this can do
Cool. And then we have one more shape to sort of do. So if you click on your circle that you've made, so the first thing to note is that because we used the circle tool to make this, it's a shape and not a path. In Inkstitch, everything needs to be a path. So to convert a shape to a path, then you can go up to the top and click path,
And you can use the frame too.
and go object to path.
You can use the frame basically whenever you like. So I've switched that back so everything is normal. And I can do it.
Actually, if you just undo that, then I'll show what happens. Yeah. So if you click on, if we look at this screen and go extensions and parameters like you would, Inkstitch.
Where was?
Sorry, Inkstitch.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, English parameters. So if we look at this screen, if it isn't a object, if it isn't a path, then it will say no embroidery path selected. Use path to object. Use path object to path to convert it to a path. So you can do that again, and we'll get all on the same page. It's a path, yeah, nice. Cool. Once we're there, we can go through and set different parameters. So this one we want to be filled in shape. So we can go using the fill stroke box.
Really nicely finished.
We want to make it a fill, flat color. We want to take away the stroke and make sure that no stroke is selected. And then because we're not doing a stroke, the last box doesn't count. Yeah.
So if you guys want to have a little play
Cool.
with it,
And then once you've gotten there,
and also experiment with kind of like these.
oh, so you want to apply a fill to it because we're going to fill it with stitches. Yeah. Nice.
Okay, so
And once we're there, we can go extensions, Inkstitch, English, params, and see what it looks like.
This design here, oh, I can put the stitch size on. So you see if I just change the stitch size, I like the meters where it does something weirdly
Right.
very similar to you. But you know, you can sort of just have a play, see what happens. And
Cool. So you notice that in this preview, it's filling in the whole shape with stitches. So the thing that changes on here, the main one is the stagger rows. Oh no, it's not. It's the spacing between rows. So have a play around with that box and see how it changes.
Can you do the same thing with text?
Yes. Yeah, so when you make text, again, I'd recommend you do it on Illustrator, and then before you leave Illustrator, convert it to outlines, like you would if you wanted to laser cut text or do something like that. And then when you bring it into here, you can give it a fill, and then go through the same process.
yeah, so I saw in there, cut it out.
Cool, so you can see that the spacing between rows is pretty self-explanatory. It changes the spacing between those rows. The default is 0.25. You can go down lower than that, but it gets very dense and very, can be quite messy. So I wouldn't recommend it.
Cut it out, put it back in.
You can also change the top one there is the angle of the lines, which will change the direction that you're doing it.
Something will
That's alright, just exit out of that. Yeah, so if you set it to 90 degrees, then it will start doing the lines vertically, and you can do any angle that you like. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So once we're happy with that one, you can hit apply and quit.
And feel free to grab out on the back end as well. They literally
And then we've set up all of the parameters for what we want our file to do. So we are ready to save it out and move over to the digital embroidery machine.
Oh, but what about the colors?
So the colors are all set on the digital embroidery machine.
Okay.
At the moment, it's set up to do each object separately, so it will pause between each object.
Okay.
So you can change out the colors between each object.
Okay, but
No, it will stop completely and won't start until you hit go.
Okay.
So there's no time limit or stress there.
Can you do overlapping objects?
You can. You have to be careful about the density because if you do like a really heavy fill with lots of stitches and then try and do another one over the top, then the thread can end up getting caught and broken, and it becomes quite messy.
Just crossing lines.
Crossing lines is yeah, all good, and you can do it. You just have to be careful that you're not putting too much onto your fabric and then trying to go through it again. Yeah.
And so these files are not like the vectors that they need to be a certain color there for them to be printed.
So there's no relationship between the colors that we see on here
Okay.
and the colors that we get on the digital embroidery machine.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So the last step, once we have everything done, with nothing selected, you go extensions, ink stitch, English, and then click embroider. So this is for exporting our file. So there's a couple of boxes in here. We're not too worried about the collapse length or the height of the layers. The output file format must be a DST format, which is the one that you've currently selected. So if you click on that, you can see like other formats. The one that our machine uses is a DST. DST. Yeah, sorry. Cool. The next thing we need to do is specify a place that we want to export this to. We won't do this on the Mac, so I'll get you to like shuffle around so you can see what's happening on these screens. So the easiest way to do this is to use the File Explorer, which is on the left-hand side at the top. It's like a little filing cabinet. So open up one of those. Yep, just click that one. Cool. And then find the guest data folder, which is either on the left panel or you can use the shortcut there, and open that one up. You can right click and make a new folder. And I would give this folder a single word. Maybe other people have been using their name, which works really well because then you know it's yours. Yep. And once you've done that, go into that folder, and then on the top bar, you can right-click on your name. If you go into the folder that you've created, double-click on it, yeah, and then right-click on the folder name at the top and click Copy. And this is going to copy the path to that folder. So then we can minimize that, go back to Inkscape, and delete what is in the directory bar, and instead replace it with. Oh, where we're at.
So this is all in your head, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a list of this instructions?
Yeah, I
Instruction
did
sheet?
do. It's out of date now because we've changed this. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So copy it, your one in there, which should be good. And then once you're ready to save it, you can hit apply. Something to note is it will be saved out as whatever your file, your Inkscape file is called. So if this was a file that we really cared about, we would be saving our Inkscape file and giving it a name that we're not going to forget. Once you've hit apply, you can go back to that folder and see the file it's created. If your Inkscape file is unnamed, it will just be embroidery. And that's pretty much it. We then plug in a USB, which you can bring with you, or we have a few here that you can borrow, and take it over to the embroidery machine. Something to note is you can double click on this and it will open up a program called Embroidery Modder, and you can see a preview of what the embroidery machine is going to use if you completely forget what this file has got on it. Otherwise, there's no way to open it.
So what's
Yeah.
the difference between the two files?
I think I saved it twice.
Yeah, so if you save the file multiple times, it will make the old one
Okay.
.1 or .2 or so
Okay.
on and so on, and the most recent one will be first.
Thank you.
That's it.